You are watching Battle of Britain, a digital learning session from Thurrock Museum. Welcome to our virtual classroom. There are 5 of these videos altogether, lettered A to E. Battle of Britain, Phase 3. This session is about Phase 3 of the Battle of Britain, where the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, attacked British towns and cities. At the same time, and escalating throughout the war, Britain was attacking German towns and cities too. Phase 3. The Blitz. From the 7th of September to the 31st of October 1940, the Luftwaffe turned their attention away from raids on airfields and the RAF. Both sides had overestimated the losses that they had inflicted on each other. Göring believed that the RAF had been almost defeated. Daylight raids on Britain's towns and cities were intended to be the final blow. These attacks defined the start of the Blitz. The Blitz. The Nazis used the term Blitzkrieg, meaning lightning war, to describe their tactic of attacking quickly with lots of aeroplanes. Once the skies above the country they wanted to invade had been cleared, they would then move in with tanks and soldiers on the ground. In Britain, the term was used to mean an aerial bombing attack on a town or city. In common use, the term was shortened to Blitz. Let's take a look at some of the different types of bombs that were dropping down on Britain's towns and cities. Take a look at this wonderful artefact. It's very badly damaged, but can you guess what it used to be? It's a bell. Can you make out the wording on the bell? It's a clue where it came from. It says Tilbury Hotel. We can see that it has blown apart. The top is melted. Only extreme heat could have done this. What could cause this type of damage? There are 2 suspects, the incendiary bomb and the HE bomb. The incendiary bomb. The incendiary bomb, also known as the firebomb or sometimes called firebomb Fritz, were usually dropped first to light up and help identify targets by setting them on fire. Ordinary people were encouraged to bury these bombs in sand to put them out, and then use water to put out the fires that had been started, as demonstrated in the photograph here from West Thurrock. As long as the fire hadn't become too big to stop, of course. The HE high explosive bomb. If a suitable target had been lit up, HE bombs came next. The target, of course, varied as the Battle of Britain progressed, moving from ships in Phase 1, the RAF in Phase 2, and towns and cities in Phase 3. If a suitable target had been lit up, a payload of HE bombs were dropped. Upon impact, they would explode. They came in different shapes and sizes, but were always heavier than the incendiaries, meaning an aeroplane carried less HEs and therefore had to use them strategically. These bombs could reduce buildings to rubble. You may also have heard about V1 doodlebugs and V2 bombs. They hadn't been fully developed enough for use in 1940, but were used in the middle and later part of the Second World War. You may also have heard about nuclear bombs. Again, these hadn't been fully developed enough for use in the time of the Battle of Britain. They were used in the Second World War, but not against people in Britain. Incendiary or HE? Which do you think destroyed the Tilbury Hotel? Doreen Goodfellow remembers.
The bombers were following the River Thames and were dropping incendiary bombs, and it was like a big bonfire. The whole of Tilbury was lit up. Such a shame as it was never rebuilt. Tilbury Hotel was a beautiful place but came to a sorry end. The bombs mostly hit the docks. They could follow the river, but not so many houses. Just a few stray bombs got those.
It was the incendiary bomb. It's easy to underestimate these as the little ones, but they were highly dangerous and destructive. The Tilbury Hotel did actually survive the Battle of Britain, burning down on the 4th of February 1944, but it's a great example of how dangerously effective these incendiary bombs could be. Britain also made incendiary bombs to drop on Germany and used extreme numbers of HEs against German civilians. In Thurrock, a record was kept of every bomb dropped that hurt or killed someone, made them homeless, or damaged any sort of building. There are lots of stories within these pages that tell us how difficult it was for people and children living through the Blitz. There are over 30,000 attacks recorded that happened throughout the Second World War, in Thurrock alone. Albert Gosnell remembers.
Albert Gosnell remembers. On Saturday, 7th of September 1940, it was 2 days before my mum's 40th birthday. She was 6 months pregnant and took shelter in a cupboard under the stairs for the first night of what would become known as the Blitz. My brother and I were 5 and 4 years old and slept in the air raid shelter in the back garden, watched over by Mrs. Rebecca Simmons. Our home was close to the River Thames, and Tilbury Docks was the point where the German bombers took a turn to the left to follow the Thames up to London. When they wanted to bomb London, they arrived and left via Thurrock.
Bombs were dangerous, but there were ways to be a little bit safer. The Blackout, shelters, and for children only, evacuation. The Blackout. What is the girl closing in the photograph? The curtains. Can curtains stop a bomb? No. What do curtains stop? The light. All lights had to be covered up or turned off during the Blitz. The darkness made it difficult to find towns and cities when flying over them in an aeroplane. If everyone in a town worked together to hide all the lights, everyone would be less likely to be found and bombed. Shelters. This is a Morrison shelter. This shelter was for people who didn't have a garden or couldn't get outside quickly, perhaps because they lived in a flat. Although these were actually also very popular with people who didn't like going outside in the cold, especially in winter. Here is a Morrison shelter after a bomb has exploded. Notice the ARP wardens nearby. The shelter is dented but stayed strong, despite the house falling down around it. This is an Anderson shelter. Whole families could fit into these. Here is the Anderson shelter again after an air raid. This is real life. 4 people were inside this shelter at the time of the attack. Their home was destroyed, but no one was hurt. In London, people used to go to the underground stations and shelter there overnight. Evacuation. Anne Andrews talks about her bad experience.
I was 5 years old when me and my big sister were evacuated. We were split up and not allowed to stay together. The family in the countryside who took me in were horrible. They took my ration book away, but they did not give me enough food to eat. I got a mild skin infection, but because they didn't give me medicine, it just got worse and worse. Luckily, my big sister with a better family within walking distance When they saw what was happening, they wrote a letter to my mum, who took us both home. We arrived naively just in time the start of the Blitz. The bombs were dropping were frightening, but at least we were together.
Luckily, Barbara Spencer had a much better experience. Here's her story.
The couple who had kindly took me in had one daughter, now in the forces, and it could not make me more welcome. I was sometimes sent to the farm across the road for eggs and milk. I was told that they were in short supply during the war, so I must have fared better in the country, and I've never forgotten the taste of the really fresh eggs and the creamy milk. The Colonel had a very extensive library, and I was often in there with my nose deep in some of the old classics. I think this is where my love of books really started. I made some good friends in the village too. I learned how to roller skate, tap dance, how to play beetle at the local beetle drive. I will never forget the time I spent in Kessingland. I think I was lucky to have such a happy time in there in comparison to the stories I've heard about some evacuees. It certainly did me no harm and gave me a love of the countryside and of course books.
Battle of Britain Day. The Blitz spirit meant that people carried on as best they could, despite the realities of danger, death, and missing their family, either because of evacuation or their parents and carers taking on wartime duties. It was a hard time for ordinary people and children. But those working on RAF bases, formerly the focus of all the bombing and attacks, got a break to rest and rebuild. With new energy and focus, they became much better at anticipating the Luftwaffe's raids. On the 15th of September, a date now remembered as Battle of Britain Day, a record number of Luftwaffe aeroplanes were shot down. The final daylight attack on London was on the 30th of September, but fierce nighttime raids continued. Attacking Britain's towns and cities did not work as a strategy to defeat Britain. History records the Battle of Britain as finishing on the 31st of October 1940. By this time it was clear that the RAF had not been defeated, meaning the land invasion of Britain, a Nazi plan known as Operation Sea Lion, was postponed. Permanently, as it turned out. The Battle of Britain was over. With support from allies and supporters, Britain had won. Unfortunately, the war was not over and bombing raids continued. Winning the Battle of Britain meant that Britain was not invaded, meaning it could continue to fight, and eventually was part of a team of allies that won the Second World War. Good work, everyone!